Okay, folks, start the recorder.
It's going.
It's going. Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is the Enfield Planning Board. It's December 27th, 2023. I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:30. We're in the Enfield DPW conference room and also on the Teams video platform. Members present tonight from my left.
Linda Jones.
Eric Russell. Dan Kiley.
I'm David Frack.
Bill Vermeer. Brad Rich. Tim Jennings. Frank Conrad.
Staff members.
Bob Taylor.
Whitney Banker, also an alternate.
Okay. As the agenda said, tonight we are having our kickoff for the zoning rewrite and master plan part 2. I've invited Lindsay to come as the co-chair of the master planning task force, and I last had a note from her, I think it was over the weekend, and I expect she'll be rolling in here at any minute.
Okay.
And without objection, I've asked her to, or I've made provision for her to sit at the table as co-chair of the master planning task force during the presentation and kickoff event. We have with us tonight 2 gentlemen who are our consultants on both projects. We have Steve Whitman of Resilience Planning in Plymouth and Mark Fougere. Did I get it right?
Well, it's Fougere.
Fougere. And you're from somewhere in southern New Hampshire.
Milford.
Milford. That is pretty south. They've come a long way through rain and fog and mud.
It's mud
So-
season?
It is. So, in deference to the fact that they both have, long and foggy drives ahead of them, I'd like to have them come up first.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
So,
Floor is yours.
In case Lindsay doesn't make it, it was my understanding that the focus of tonight would be mostly on the HOP grant,
Mhm.
housing stuff. If she does make it, maybe towards the end, we could talk a little bit about where things are with the master plan. And I think Liz from our office is going to be reaching out to Rob to see the status of the steering committee and when we want to have them meet for the first time,
Mhm.
if that works.
And even if she does not come, I'm the other co-chair.
Great.
And Phil was on the master planning task force, Brad was on it, and Eric was on it.
Great,
So
okay.
we have enough people that are familiar with it who may or may not be continuing. So you can go into it in as much depth as you'd like.
Okay, so the agenda that Rob printed out and handed out is something that Mark and I came up with. Our hope is that for the most part, we'll kind of facilitate the conversation, but we'll be listening and taking notes. And what we want to do is really get you talking. We've already started reading your regulations. We've already read the master plan. We need some additional context from all of you. So maybe before we get into that, we'll just do short introductions about who we are so they can decide if they still want.
Too
late,
the contracts.
So we'll give you the really short one. So our firm, Resilience Planning and Design, there's 4 of us. We'll be working with you, as David said, both on helping you finish the master plan, those remaining chapters, and any additional mapping and the outreach associated, and helping you with this HOP grant and get all this work done by July. So we've had a couple of coordination meetings in preparation for tonight. We have in-house GIS. We work with CAI, so any of the layers that are created, we can make sure delivered to them and accessible to you in a way that you're accustomed. And we have graphic design capabilities. We'll be able to match what the previous consultant was doing for you. And I think it's through the beauty of these 2 projects running in parallel that we can make both projects work. So we're excited to be here, but to do it alone would have been daunting. And to be the only person asking questions about your zoning and giving you ideas on how to go forward would have been a limitation. So we asked Mark to join us because we like working with Mark. And we don't always see eye to eye. And so we can be like, well, why do you see it that way? Well, I see it this way. So who are you? Why would we want to work with
I
you?
have no idea. We've known each other, actually, Steve and I have known each other probably
25
20
years,
20
yeah.
plus years. So we've worked together on many different aspects of things, even before when he was working for the state back in the day. So I'm an independent planning consultant. Been working for over 20 years. My own firm with me, myself, and I, a 3-person firm, and mainly dealing with local land use issues. I'm a planning consultant for 5 towns in the state, providing services to them. You know, they're smaller towns, they don't have the staff. I also provide services for private developer companies as well. I was a municipal planner for 12 years, including the deputy planning director for the city of Nashua. So I bring a different perspective, and which is good to bounce off ideas. And I'm very up on housing issues. Housing advocate, wrote the workforce housing municipal guide that when it came out with Steve Keach and others back in 2010 for New Hampshire housing. I've done some updates to that for New Hampshire housing, so I've done quite a bit of work with them. So looking forward to this effort, and thank you for having us come.
So the way we broke up the agenda, and we can follow the conversation. So if it starts to wander, we'll try to get the information we need. We're not trying to force a really linear agenda, but we want to just talk a little bit about why you want to do this work. And so that first part, kind of project overview and purpose, we're hoping to hear from Rob and from all of you as board members, a little bit of background. We've heard a little bit from David, and I think we've heard a little bit from Brad, but we want to expand that conversation. So, you know, what are the issues you're trying to address or resolve? What are some of the ZBA cases that are coming forward that we may want to try to, you know, address that? And then we have this great early thoughts memo from the Taylors that we just want to run down and touch on some of those where maybe some additional context would be helpful for us. Mark wants to share a little bit on workforce housing law, answer kind of questions around that, just kind of talk about what it is that we want to help you try to do and see if you have questions or concerns related to that. And then we'll explain to you the audit process that we've already started and like the timeline over the next, it's quick. So it's, you know, we're going to have something to you in a couple of weeks as a draft, just kind of our findings. Then we'll meet with you and walk through it. So we will talk about that a little bit. And then we have to also start talking about the stakeholder meeting for February. So it's a fair amount to do before we drive in the fog. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. If anything else comes up, you have other ideas, like we can follow some tangents, we can pivot. So I guess under that project overview and purpose, I don't know if anyone wants to kick off, kind of, yeah, please.
I think Enfield was a little late to the game with zoning in particular. We didn't adopt zoning here until 1990.
Wow.
And Dan or Linda, who have been here a lot longer than I have, may be able to tell you some of the politics. You sort of happen to be in an area of the state where there's a lot of other towns that don't have zoning. Canaan, Grafton, Dorchester, these are towns that don't have any zoning at all.
Right.
But when they put up the zoning atlas and they say, oh, look, Canaan will allow this and allow that. Yeah, they'll allow anything, you know, that's basically the long and the short of it. So Enfield was a little late to the game. And I think there was some efforts a couple of times to try to get it to pass. And it may have gotten watered down at the front end. I think, you know, looking back on it, you know, they were trying to basically sell it. And I think there was some concern from residents, oh my God, stuff was happening in those days, sure, in the late 80s, early 90s, that were probably, you know, shots across the bow for some towns. Like either you get your stuff together or this, what you're gonna have, you know, Walmart's popping up on every corner. You know, I think that's how we get started. And I think, you know, some mistakes were made. One of our big things, and it'll be on your list there, is lot size. When we created the zoning, we didn't really look at what was on the ground too much. We just said, this is sort of a utopian view of what we wanted. And so a lot of lots consequently are non-conforming lots. So it puts everybody or lots of people at a disadvantage right out of the gate. So we have, R1 is a 1 acre zoning. That's sort of our village or downtown district. We have an R3 that's around Crystal Lake. You can see our zoning map over here. So R1 is sort of the orange, R3 is the yellow, and then the R5, our 5 acre minimum is the green. And then we do have that tan as our conservation zone. And I told you guys earlier, we're about 30% of conserved land. And Kurt, who's one of our alternates now, can give lots of background on our conservation zones because he's worked with Land Trust and other organizations to monitor easements and so forth. But something we're real proud about. Enfield does have a nice, I mean, I think that somewhere along the line, a goal was to have towns 30% conserved.
Yeah, even 25 is good.
25 is, I think, respectable.
Yeah,
So
right.
we're in a good position there. And there's also private organizations that are involved. We do have some spin-off land. We've got what are the other, there's a couple of other foundations. Is it Natty Decker,
Private Grafton Pond,
Grafton Pond Trust?
it touches a bit on Enfield, but it butts Enfield.
Yep.
Their property crosses the town line, basically.
Okay.
But of course, I mean, you guys probably have tons of experience with this. What you see in Enfield is a lot of, rural dirt roads. We got about 70 miles of roads in town. It's about half and half, 35 miles of paved roads and 35 miles of dirt road. We do not own our own gravel pit, so we struggle, particularly in this last week or so. But I think we've done a better job than a lot of other towns, especially some of our neighboring towns. And because we don't own our own gravel pit, we bring in the good stuff. We go to Pike in West Lebanon and buy the premium hard pack to top our roads with. So consequently, when they fell apart on Monday of last week, we didn't fall apart as bad, but it was bad. I mean, everybody here can tell stories about people marooned and, we did have
Bad
those
weather.
terrible storms this
Yeah.
past summer that did some serious damage and caused a lot of property damage. And ecologically, I think we also took it very hard in our water bodies. As you can see, we've got at least 2 sort of primary water bodies in Lake Mascoma and Crystal Lake. And then we have several smaller ponds. But I think you'll find that as we do this project, Enfield is at the intersection of housing needs and water quality needs. And so I think you'll find from this group, that is obviously going to be a guiding factor for us, is that the development pattern along the lake has been heavy. We've got very small lots. Originally, these were little seasonal camps. Maybe somebody came out for a couple weeks in the summer and spent some time there. They may have had a primitive outhouse or a toilet that was plumbed into a 55-gallon drum underground that worked fine for the 2 weeks they were there. But what we've seen there is obviously there's a trend, sort of gentrification trend.
Right.
Maybe 40 years ago, a lot of those seasonal camps were upgraded to more, 3-season camps. And maybe a fireplace was installed and made it so you could spend spring and fall there. And then, lately, has been big part of my job is that these seasonal camps are coming down, or even the 3-season camps, and being replaced with year-round residences with quite wealthy people. I mean, the real estate values on the lakefront and everywhere else have gone through the roof. Housing costs are astronomical. And so we're seeing, just a simple lot on Mascoma Lake without any building on it, 500,000 for a 1/3 or 1/4 acre lot. That's just the piece of land to start out with. And then they're building $1 million houses and we're dealing with that. So I think one of the weaknesses of our zoning is the setbacks are all prescribed, very rigid. And because everybody's got these non-conforming lots, they're needing to build on their very small lots. And so they always come in and talk to me for zoning variances, area variances. Very infrequently are we doing use variances. It's area variances.
Okay.
So I need to build my $1 million house, but I need to encroach on the setback to the neighbor's lot, or I need to encroach on the setback to the street. Or there's a third one there, and it's the waterfront buffer. We have a 50-foot setback to water, which is sort of in parallel with New Hampshire's shorelands.
Right.
But it is the most complex stuff that we do in my office and as a town, I think, from a planning and zoning standpoint. And then I think, and I'll wrap up, I don't want to do too much of the talking, but I think, you know, our original intent with zoning, and it's the same in my hometown and others all around the state, was that they sort of wanted village development. They wanted density in the village, but we got the opposite. And so our job, I think, is to sort of figure out why that occurred. You know, we've seen very little change in our downtown. It's starting to happen now. We've got a few projects coming, one that's underway. But most of the villages are relatively unchanged. And then instead, we've seen the 5 and 10 acre lot subdivisions. And if you look, you can see them on that map there, because that is the base layer of our tax maps. And as you drive out the back roads, you'll see those. They tend to be very rectangular, sort of narrow and long. Typically, they're needing the minimum frontage requirements, and then the acreage requirements, they go further back. So that's sort of a pattern of development that's happened. And consequently, you know, we spent a lot of money maintaining dirt roads. We have a Caterpillar grader here that gets a workout all year long. And we're not interested in buying a new one because they're so expensive. So we continue to refurb and rehab that sucker as much as we can to keep it working. And you know, we've got a great DPW. They're very busy. One of our luxuries here in town is that we actually, about 1970, we got some federal money to create a municipal sewage collection system. And I think it was through clean water money that helped to clean up. I mean, Mascoma Lake at one time was sort of an open sewer because of all the toxic runoff coming from a big mill in town. We had a mill called the Baltic Mill. The Shakers were making flannel. I mean, there was sort of a history there. And so we finally got on top of it with a urban collection system for our downtown area. I say collection because we don't treat, we actually pump our sewage to the city of Lebanon, and they treat it for us and discharge in the Connecticut River, treated effluent. But we actually own, to this day, we own a percentage of their capacity in treatment at Lebanon. It's 300,000 gallons per day of treatment capacity, of which we only use about 70,000 daily.
Wow, so you have quite a bit.
So I think that's one of the reasons why you're here today, is that we're starting to become a little bit more into the bullseye. Lebanon, Hanover, White River have really seen it. They're building housing like crazy in all areas of those cities. And I think that the developers are starting to say, okay, we're running out of room in Lebanon. Where else can we go? And they're looking at us. And as we did our master plan, housing was a very, very big thing.
Cross.
Yeah, we're preaching to the choir. You guys know all about this. And so that's a little background for you. You know, I mean, happy to go into depth on everything else, and obviously want these guys to do more talking than that, but I just wanted to give you sort of a historic.
Super helpful.
Yep.
So one of the things that is sort of a mystery about the town of Enfield, having virtually unlimited sewer treatment capacity and having expanded both of our main sewer trunk lines on both Route 4 and 4A, over the last, I think, 10 or 20 years, our population has declined. And I think that figure is what, 300, Brad, that we're
It's
down, or?
3 census in a row, our population has gone down where other towns in the Upper Valley have increased. So we're the only town that's going the wrong direction.
And, you know, I don't know why that has happened. Possibly the school had something to do with it, but last year, our elementary school was named a blue ribbon school by, I think, US Department of Education.
1990 census had 4.7 people per household at 1.7 of 2020.
And that's sort of a statewide.
It certainly follows.
Yeah,
If I was, you know, like they were saying, the town population is basically flat. For the last census, probably too. I don't know what the other towns, surrounding towns are doing, how much variation there is on the other towns either, so.
Okay.
but the Upper Valley as a whole has been growing over the last 25 years at least.
Right.
And we're just not seeing that, even though we have a lot of desirable qualities. We've got the lake, we've got a rail trail, we've got sewer, we've got municipal water.
Brand new high school.
At this point, we have,
Conservation land.
a lot of conservation land, a lot of recreational opportunities. And why aren't people flocking to us?
Well,
Well, there's a reason. We've had
I know.
zero cluster housing development. The number is zero. There is nothing that's been built that's more than 5 apartments to a building,
And it was allowed,
and it has been allowed.
but you're
But-
forgetting that kids grow up and it's a big world out there.
I know.
They aren't moving in next door to their parents anymore.
Well, no, but they are moving in next door to Lebanon and Hanover,
Well,
and they're moving,
mine
they're
are
moving
moving
next door to,
away.
and they're moving next door to Canaan, which does not have any zoning.
Dan, I like to make a statement. It's hard to quantify because I
Right,
don't have the history you do, but I'm just gonna throw a number out there and you tell me how far off I am. But it pushes back a little bit on what you suggested, I think, Rob. The areas where you see obvious, large lot development. So they're divided up into like narrow lots and
Yeah.
so.
Bowling alleys.
right.
Yeah, the bowling alleys.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, and here's the number I'm gonna guess at,
Yeah.
that 75% of those pre-existed with zoning. Now think about 1990, what's been built since?
Yeah, they're all single family that's been built since then.
Well, what I'm getting at though is
Right.
what you're seeing up here is not a result of zoning. That already was in place.
Oh, I agree. A lot of it was, but I mean, like Palmer Road was definitely built the way it was because of zoning. They had to be 5-acre lots. They made them bowling alleys in order to get as many as they could.
But how much of what we see up here as bowling alleys was already in place
Oh.
when zoning was,
I agree. Probably 90% of it.
so
Right. That's why there's so many non-conforming lots. That's why, I mean, I'm sorry, the big one I always say is when they put in zoning, they made Crystal Lake an R3. When there was not a single house around Crystal Lake that was 3 acres.
There's 2 now.
There's 2 now, right? Yeah,
yeah, and those zoning areas were, as far as I can tell, very arbitrarily chosen. There's no rhyme or reason.
no, it was a silo. It was, you take town hall and you go like this, and the further you get out, the bigger the lots have to be.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how they set it up.
When's the last time a new town road got built with a subdivision for a subdivision?
There's 2 that I've been on the board maybe 15 years now, plus or minus.
Yeah.
And one predates me on the board. It's Fitzgerald Drive.
Gerald Drive and probably LaPan Circle.
And I don't know when LaPan was done.
LaPan was probably just about, well,
Yeah,
actually,
but,
LaPan was
off of
before
Methodist Hill,
zoning.
Ridge Lane or something.
Ridge Lane, yeah.
Off of Methodist Hill
right,
was the 2
the Birch Lane,
that I can think of where the developer built the road and then the town took it over.
right,
Fitzgerald Drive, the town took it because the developer was heading south, going to Florida.
Right.
And there was no association. And it was built as town specs.
So it was supposed to be a
So-
condo, you mean?
No, it was single families.
single family
Both- Yeah,
house,
both
but
are single families.
Okay.
The only,
it was a half mile long with only in and out, that's it,
yeah,
in and
Yeah,
out with a
they're both-
cul-de-sac on the end,
right, and both are cul-de-sacs.
right.
Interesting, a little bit more history for you guys too, is in the, I would say in the 80s, well, 70s, 80s. In the 70s, you had Eastman. You guys are probably familiar with Eastman
That's
development
down there in the.
which we have a
Former
portion of
Grantham Park.
in the Boot Heel.
Right.
Yep. Largely focused in Grantham, but also in Springfield too. It's very large. It's probably 1,500 homes in that.
Right.
Then we had right along the lake in what was Shaker land, in the eighties, that was the Lower Shaker, village went in, and that was a lot of single family homes, very small, little lots. And I think,
Right there, yeah.
and I think that what happened,
This one over here?
yeah,
Two
Lower
tech-
Shaker Village,
lot
right
of
by the
them.
museum.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of them are like 2/10 of an acre.
And then we also got the condominium complex of what's called Lakeview on
Right.
Route 4A.
Yeah.
And so I think zoning was sort of a knee-jerk reaction to what they saw happening.
Exactly, it was.
It was like, oh my God, because actually Shaker Village was proposed way bigger too.
Right.
And ultimately, the developer walked away from a lot of that land that's now conserved.
That's right, okay.
But originally, I've got plans upstairs, it was gonna be like 500 or 600 houses
Oh, yeah,
up on that Tane section
right.
before they conserved that. And so I think that was what people were like, oh my God, we gotta slow this down.
That's usually what happens, something
Right.
Yeah,
You know.
jerk.
comes into town, you know.
So I think what I said was reasonably accurate.
Oh, yeah.
It seems to be, and what you just said is accurate, Bob. I wonder whether or not our zoning ordinance, the main effect of it was basically freezing in place everything you see up there. There's been very little changes, over the years.
Yeah,
We're still building, I mean, I'm
we
gonna
made
give
it,
a report
it's
later.
back to you made it harder to develop.
We netted out about 16 new residential units this year.
Right.
Okay.
And last year, about 16. We're running 10 to 16 average as a net. Obviously, we're losing some. Sometimes mobile homes are pulled out and they pull in a new one. And so we have to count them obviously as a net. But, yeah, I mean, you were talking, or I think Brad referenced it, same problem in my hometown is that square footage, the number of people per square footage is going down.
Right.
So you got these giant, big old farmhouses with very few people living in. Sometimes it's one. I mean, my dad lives in a 3,000 square foot house all by himself. And I keep saying, we could build some apartments in here. Let's do it.
You.
Exactly. So I think that's sort of a trend New Hampshire wide. I mean, I think some towns have got it going on, but there's a lot of towns that have that same sort of problem. It's just, and I think that people's tastes are changing. We've seen younger people, they don't necessarily want 5 or 10 acres to take care of. They just as soon live in a very small studio apartment or 1 or 2 bedroom and have access to services. It's really, I think, younger sect looking at that. We do have some public transit in town here now. We've got advanced transit as the blue line comes through on Route 4 headed to Canaan. They've expanded service and seen an explosion in the ridership with the expansion. So,
You're a good PR firm. Don't oversell it.
well, it's interesting.
The bus travels
I'm
through
sorry.
twice in the morning.
Twice in the
Oh,
morning.
yeah,
Twice in the evening.
absolutely. But
So it's-
region-wide, it's
Do you
just
see people on it?
Yeah, actually, it does get used. There's 3 in the morning that
Right.
go out to Canaan and back. So it's like 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m.
Right.
And then,
It used to be no weekends.
and then you're SOL, and then
Right.
you've got 2 that
Now
come
they're
back in the afternoon, and beyond that year.
We're getting off the agenda a bit.
Anyways.
Well, I think what's been helpful is the context you provided on these
good.
bullets has helped. I think we can go into the early thoughts, because I think it starts to explain, when we see something like, too many non-conforming lots. You had actually told us a little bit in one of our meetings, but the rigid setbacks and non-conforming lots, makes sense. So it seems like changing setbacks, addressing that as part of changing maybe the zoning districts is up for discussion. As I guess I should say before we go through this list, we need to, because of your timeline, you have to be done by July. And because they're housing funds, we need to focus on housing funds, but where we can address or leave the necessary breadcrumbs for you to go finish anything else. So if anything falls too far outside and we're feeling pressed for time, we need to try to focus on the housing stuff, but we'll do as much as we can. Because while you have the time and attention to do this, it's a pretty wonderful opportunity. Zoning ordinance is a knee jerk. Conflicts with state of New Hampshire regs, anything stick out specifically?
Well, so I've been sort of preaching this every time I go to these statewide conferences and meetings, and we do have a state rep with us now who can help us affect some change. But, you know, everybody's pointing the finger at planning and zoning. It's your fault.
Yeah,
But as we've seen, there's a lot of state of New Hampshire responsibility for all this. DOT, DES,
Fish and
wetlands,
game.
shorelands, fish and game.
Mhm.
Fish and game, when we had a developer in here the other day, and they were like, we gotta do a fish and game. See you later. They literally walked
right.
from a project that had potential when they heard they were gonna have to deal with fish and game. And that's just, I mean, to me, it's eye opening, right? You're like, okay, what's going on
There's
here?
been a lot of new folks in that division
Yep.
and it's not good.
Yeah.
DOT, there's this big problem with people like, you call them up and say, I want a driveway permit for 100 new houses. And they're like, okay, we're gonna send this up the channel. We'll get back to you. Maybe you'll hear.
Or
from us
not
next
send it
year.
up the channel.
Right, I mean,
Yeah.
there's no answers.
You just don't
It's the
hear.
uncertainty, the developer now says, oh my God, I don't know. I mean, I gotta go where I have some certainty. They don't like uncertainty.
You know,
And so those are some of those things that we threw out there as, I think, you know, I mean, I don't know what we can do in our zoning ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough.
Right. I mean, DOT spends all their money in southern New Hampshire on 93.
Yeah,
They haven't gotten near Route 4 from in years. And that's the big issue we have is that's the major road coming through here. And whenever you want to have a development, they say, oh, you gotta have a turning lane. Well, I'm sorry, it's a 4-rod right of way.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do with that?
and everybody says, oh, it's planning and zoning that's causing.
planning
this
and zoning.
problem. It's like, these guys are ready to work.
A lot of
They're ready
this
to go.
stuff never even gets to us because
Exactly.
the developer walks away from it.
Right.
Do you have any transportation projects for Route 4 planned in the pipeline?
Yeah, we're,
You do.
Yeah.
we've been on the governor's 10-year.
10-year plan, we've been on it for
30 years.
We're not- it's a long-
Join the
yeah,
club.
we're on year- Yeah, we're on year
Just
18,
hang down.
of the 10-year plan.
They've got a proposal to replace a very dysfunctional intersection right in the middle of town, where Main Street and Maple Street hit Route 4 with a rotary, you know, a traffic
Okay.
circle,
Yeah.
which we think would be a improvement substantially, but, you know, that one.
Is that just near the post office and the
Yeah.
gas station? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be nice.
there's
'Cause
a
it-
Jake's Market there.
Right, yeah.
Right.
There's some
issues though with the park being donated by the federal government and the federal government's got to release.
Yeah, that's got
Change.
LWCF
Right.
easements. Yep.
It's a really weird combination going on.
It's that hair.
Everything's very technical.
The other thing that's in the work is a passing lane and realignment of Route 4 at the western end of town where it comes up the hill.
Yeah, from the high school.
No,
Up the hill.
The other direction.
from
Oh,
other
sorry,
side of
yeah.
town, Lebanon side,
That-
Lemon inside.
That real steep hill.
Right.
We call it dry.
steep and windy.
Yep.
And you get, you know, a sudden snow squall and you have, people that can't make it up the hill, which causes a backup probably to Lebanon sometimes before the state can get out and sand and salt.
Route 4 in Enfield, that's sort of our busiest part of the road is 13,000 cars a day.
No,
It's a busy road. Kurt,
Yeah, on that topic, you folks have any knowledge or ideas on a town working with the states on state roads, access and town issues when the state owns the road like Route 4?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good appropriate example. I mean, we're doing another one of these HOP grants in Farmington together, which is Route 11. Has an even higher number of cars a day.
I mean, DOT they do corridor plans. Just try to lay out, you know, future improvements to a state roadway. You know, there's one being planned in Greenland, at Stratham, you know, because of the growth of Pease. But that's, you know, 10-year funding.
Right.
That you have to get in line with, and it's like 3 or 4 years out. Meanwhile, there's a mile back up there each way every morning in
Yeah.
Greenland.
Yeah, I was thinking more in terms of what the town itself, planning board or Rob as the administrator, to sort of like, this is what the town wants, to get the states to look at and at least consider what we're trying to do.
At least evaluate the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I just,
That's a
question
you're not looking to necessarily have an answer tonight, but it's.
right, I'm just thinking, it's just,
I want an answer.
because there was one project that was proposed on Route 4, further down near the Canaan, towards Canaan.
Right.
And, after like a year, probably 2 years, of a serious developer, they just gave up.
Right.
And I heard part of the issue was dealing with Route 4 access.
Is it a district issue? Is it the district engineer or staff
We're
here?
in Region 2 of DOT.
Yeah.
And they're actually very responsive. I mean, we get good service from them. They're actually right in town. They're on exit 16, right near Wildac, the ski area.
Yeah.
And, we get good service from them, but like you
When it
said, I
gets to
think there's been a
concrete.
lot of turnover further up the channel.
Yeah.
And anytime they have a question or they don't feel like this is something we should be answering locally, they push it up there and it sort of goes there to die. And we just don't get response. We have explored taking some of it as an urban compact.
Well, that was gonna be one
And,
thing.
we have a select board that seems supportive of that, but unfortunately, the developer sort of just was like, it's too much uncertainty. And they sort of have said to us,
Well, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that ends up, you guys basically taking it over.
Right.
So
and
you
there's
don't wanna take over a section of junk,
Yeah,
Exactly.
right?
I mean, I think what we can say is, so we have in here to do the stakeholder meeting, and we know that there'll be some interviews, some one-on-one interviews, so if we think it's beneficial to talk to somebody specifically within DOT, we can also pull some examples from other communities, to look at how they're addressing it. Like, all this is part of the exercise we should be doing over the next couple of months, so that you could say, yeah, I like that, a little more of this, a little less of that, and we'd have some rational basis maybe for what it is you want to bring to voters after the summer.
Yeah.
So another issue with our zoning regs is lack of clarity in certain sections. And I'm gonna let Kurt and Tim talk about, one particular paragraph in our zoning regs that we have no idea what
What
it
it means.
means.
Yeah, what do they?
And we've talked about it and beat our heads against the wall, and Rob feels one way and half of the board feels the other way, and the other half feels that Rob is correct. And it's, there are a number of, unclear areas that need to be addressed.
This one he's referring to is, it could be a serious problem in the near future.
Okay.
So,
Like next month.
so it's
Oh.
like,
Well, we
don't wanna get into the details of that.
Well, I mean, there's
no.
specific sections though that are in
Right.
there. You wanna send us a list of those numbers.
Yeah,
And we'll just make,
It's helpful.
I mean, I've already read this ordinance once
Right.
and have notes and, it just takes 3 to 4 readings before it starts sinking in, so.
yeah.
Right, it's 35 years old. And I don't know, Kurt, would you say probably we make 2 or 3 changes
Yeah.
a year?
we tweak around the
We
edges.
tweak around the edges, and what's happened is some of the tweak around the edges has brought up other problems. Because the unintended consequences become, like you said, okay, we're going to make them 1/4 acre lots, but you didn't change the road frontage sections. It's,
But that's
You
not
can't do
a,
it.
it's,
Basically,
you
it's these
don't feel
two
too
lines.
bad because
Right.
it's not an unusual situation.
Right.
And the other one. So
I mean,
it's
you take what was one document and
And
you
then
amend it to
scroll
death,
down.
exactly,
Yeah.
it's gonna
And you-
eventually catch
Yeah.
up to you, so
exactly,
the next time around, maybe it's just a whole recodification and start over.
right.
Yeah, I mean, that's
that's
the
where
point
we are.
where we're
Versus-
at and why our,
It's
Then
just this
the-
line.
Little nibbles, it's time to.
yeah.
Right.
Don't throw the baby out with the
No, I mean, there's always,
bathwater.
there's bones in there you wanna keep,
Yeah.
but
But, there's an awful lot that has been, patched here, welded on there, baling wire there. And,
I mean, if you have 6 different interpretations, you should have known
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
exactly. And then,
It's not that hard.
right,
It's
you
zoning.
fix the zoning ordinance, but you didn't change it on the site plan.
Right, yeah.
So I'd like to make a statement, and then
Yeah.
let's see how many of you agree with this or not. And that is, if I can
state this halfway intelligently. I don't think there's anything in the existing zoning ordinance that is sacred item.
Okay.
That's
And
good
that
to know.
if, I know you're gonna do this audit, which you have to. But I think the purpose of the audit is probably just to convince others that our zoning ordinance needs a lot of work. I think
Yeah.
the board here in general feels like we want to start from fresh slate. Nothing in there that is sacred. So we want to come up with our general principles and ideas, and this is what we want to see, and then have fresh words written everywhere.
It's a lot to get done by July.
Yeah, I know.
We offer.
I think
And
that's a, as long as we're on the same
That's,
page.
that's our aspirational goal. And the reality is we're 6 months behind at this point.
No, but I mean, I think if what we're hearing from Tim resonated with all of
Oh, yeah.
you,
Oh, yeah,
we won't lean on the budget too hard on the audit, because we want to spend more time helping with the other. people.
Yeah.
So it'll
exactly.
be a light touch on the audit to
Right.
show the big places that we see are inconsistent with your master plan.
Mhm.
I have a question.
Please.
You know, instead of starting from scratch, you guys have had a lot of experience of writing zoning regulations for multiple communities. Can you find comparable communities that you can
Steal from?
We're very good at that.
Make it. I could make it.
That's what we do.
That's why we hire you guys, because you've got all that experience, all the, I mean, I'm sure there's towns with lakes and there's
Yeah.
towns with this conservation areas and there's, you know, so I'm thinking,
And none of it's copyrighted.
Right.
No,
No.
that's a form of flattery, right?
I'm thinking you guys probably, can find something similar,
As a jumping off point,
a jumping off point, yeah.
because I wouldn't have a problem if there were 50% less pages to this zoning than it is today.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was another thing I meant to say.
If we could make it simpler, that would be really,
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Well, I mean, the biggest problem typically is lack of clarity. That's where you run into
Right.
problems, you know?
So like Conway?
Well, it's also, you make it bigger to, I'm not saying make it harder to develop, but make it more confusing.
And to that point, we have talked about a number of times saying we're not, there may be some disagreement here. We're not really interested in a lot of complicated formulas.
Okay.
Right.
No,
We don't care if it's a flag lot. We don't care if it's not 4-1.
Shape factor.
Shape factors.
We want to wind up with a very user-friendly product that a potential homeowner or developer does not have to hire, the.
Us to figure it out.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah,
To
or
argue against it,
a law firm or whatever.
Right.
Hey,
We want it understandable and logical and stated clearly.
Another thing we've said, that instead of a long list of things that you can do in this zone, here's the 5 things you can't do. Otherwise,
It's open.
now.
Yeah.
Again, there may be some pushback on
So,
it.
and that's not, so I think I shared with David, it's not something I've seen much of. I don't know if you've seen. But what we have seen, and I think your form-based code, which we should probably go to next, starts to go in that direction, is to simplify what you can do and say, you can have commercial activity, and commercial activity is a lot of different things.
Right.
So, I mean, City of Dover, where we both worked, in their central business district, I think they have 6 or 7 uses. That's it. You can
Right.
pretty much do anything.
Mhm.
They're more worried about the placement of the building on the lot and some of those other things that impact, but they don't
Right.
care if it's a yoga studio, a smoothie bar, 14 apartments, like that, they free it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing, Steve, is that currently housing is allowed in all districts.
Okay.
And I hope I speak for the board when I say we'd like to keep it that way.
All right, I have a question. So you've been answering a lot of the questions or giving more context in the early thoughts. It's nice to see you're on the same page. And we just talked about whether it should be inclusive, or exclusive, and we can come back to that. If you do have examples that you like, where it says, here are the 3 things you can't do, you can't have a junkyard, a pig farm or whatever. Like, show us if you do have an example of a community. I mean, I think we could look at that. Route 4 form-based code district is a loser.
Yes.
But what's the biggest, I guess, you haven't seen activity, but do you have a sense of why or why, what went wrong?
My 2 cents on that is developers don't necessarily want to be told exactly what they have to do. You want some bumpers on the outside,
Mhm.
guardrails maybe.
Yep.
But give them some leeway to do things in the middle. I just think it's bad policy to start saying you gotta have this slope roof and these number of windows and the angle of the, presentation.
It's the architectural stuff you think that's a
Yeah,
challenge?
I think that's where we got a little over our skis. So I mean, we have one example that came in and they sort of laughed in our face with what they ended up doing was we have this fenestration requirement and that's in that form code. And they said, okay, so they put basically fictitious windows on the outside.
Right.
There's no window, I mean, on the inside, there's no windows.
Right.
Which I think was kind of the spirit of the ordinance.
Right.
But the letter of the law, they put the windows on the outside. They're fake.
Is this the dollar store?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody looks at that like that was
That
a
came into
mess.
interpretation,
Right.
and the previous administrator signed off on it.
Oh, yeah, but he could not. We didn't say the window has to go through. We said it has to, because what we didn't want on form base is you can't have the parking to the road. It has to be to the side. But you have to have a window, you have to have fenestration to the road. Well, that's exactly what they did.
Right, well, so it's sort of the pluses and minuses of being very specific versus
Right,
leaving it open.
leaving it open.
Leaving it open.
It also,
I think form-based zoning has a place when you're trying to preserve the feel of a village area,
Mhm.
for instance. But Route 4 is just a hodgepodge of old houses, old
Pizza shops.
pizza shops,
New
new
pizza
pizza shops.
Yeah. Self-storage.
It's, it's,
Misplaced, maybe.
it's an area of town that I seriously think we have to cede to what, commercial people.
Right.
Whatever happens, whatever they feel will work for them within very broad limits.
And for a mix of uses.
For
Yeah.
mixed, yeah.
And I just think regulating class and style is a loser. I just think that
Mhm.
we can't regulate class and style.
Did you work on the form-based code internally? Did you have a consultant?
Brandy did it, didn't she?
Randy
Yeah.
did it.
Okay. Cause it looked like she used some of the approach we used in Dover and in Lancaster, but I wonder if we look, so
She based it on, where was it? Vermont.
Yeah, it looked like a Vermont
It was a
document.
Vermont. She based it on up just south of Burlington,
okay.
Essex.
Richmond or Richmond, I think, actually, not Essex.
Okay.
On that section, short of just deleting everything and just leaving it as a commercial strip, do we have time to do something special there?
I think you do. The reason I asked where it came from is we did a form-based code for Dover. It was the first New Hampshire form-based code, but it wasn't downtown. It was exactly what you're talking about. It was trying to capture and retain a lot of the character. We then did one in Lancaster, which is smaller than all of you, but on the state route.
Mhm.
And the village, they wanted to do that. And then they have this middle section of their main street where it's a little bit more parks and spread out homes. And so they wanted to make it a little bit different. And then they have their short kind of commercial sprawl section where they wanted parking to the side and to the rear. They didn't want to really drive the architectural too much. And at the time they weren't focused on housing, but we're now back there working with them and they're trying to do what you're doing. So I'd like to look at that, compare it to what you have and see what Mark thinks from other places, because it may be a way to simplify it. but not lose the clarity of a form-based code, which is nice. The
Right.
developer can come in and say, oh, I could do this much here, and these are the things I need to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, if it lends itself to just the old fashioned strip commercial area, trying to stick a form based on top of it. It's just,
Right.
you're putting a lipstick on a pig, so. Form based
Well, in the-
has its place,
The land out back isn't that great.
Okay.
Right, I
To
mean,
be
just
truthful about it.
geographically, the area has a lot of issues,
Right.
probably development.
Well, yeah,
There's floodplains, flood zones,
and it's that,
for access is,
Right.
they get hills, not big, but enough to kill your sightlines.
right,
right.
So DOT goes like,
right,
But
And-
you also have
and-
intersecting roads.
yeah.
And
right.
750 foot around the wellheads,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
which are right behind that.
Right, so it's a difficult place to work with, just from the ground up.
Right.
Right,
And a quarter mile back is the Canaan line.
right. Yeah, when you look at your whole town, it's a
Right,
small part.
and yeah, the form based on top of it, it's just like.
right.
see
Yeah.
it.
See what they were trying to do, as I read that,
Yeah.
they really wanted it to be mixed use. They wanted.
Right.
They wanted commercial activity on the lower, first floor level, and they wanted residential upstairs, and it was by right, second floor residential.
Right.
So, they were hoping for like Keene or Concord, but that's not what we got.
Right, I mean, you can see high density apartments or units in that area.
Right.
And then some kind of retail, commercial retail that would blend with it, that people would go shopping at.
But wouldn't you think if you're trying to force first floor retail in this corridor, it's gonna make it a non-starter for a developer?
So that's what I think's happening.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that
Right.
the restrictions on residential there stopped any and all
Yeah.
development there.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
my opinion.
We're on the same issue in another community.
Yeah.
They have zoning and,
Right.
I mean, first floor, it's a great idea, but it needs the right context. It needs to be in the right spot.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a big difference between downtown Dover and where it can work.
Right.
Because you get the mass there,
Right.
versus
Yeah.
along a strip center.
Right.
Strip corridor, I should say.
I mean, we have, as you talk to people throughout town, one common theme is a desire for more vibrancy downtown.
Okay.
And that means different things to different people, but that's a overall theme is people want more vibrancy downtown. And we have a catch-22 of, well, in order to have vibrancy, you need to have people, and we have zoning that restricts people's ability to build housing. And that goes to Route 4, access from the state, which we can't do anything about, but we can write zoning that allows it, which will communicate to the state what we want. And it goes to just, the restrictions that we've placed on ourselves. And I mean, my view is if we can create zoning that allows people to build housing, you'll bring people in, and then that will supply the
Right.
people you need to have the vibrancy that people desire.
Right, okay.
And I think that goes along Route 4, and it goes along Main Street, and maybe there's a couple of little spots around, but.
Yeah.
In general, I think that's a big theme that people want, is something to promote vibrancy, and, that's a decade-long vision. But the last decade, the way it was implemented prevented it from happening.
Right,
And I can give my personal experience from being in town I've only been here a little over 20 years. But our zoning definitely prevents homeowners from doing things. I mean, on every property that I've owned, I've only owned 3. I've had some project I wanted to do that I could not do because of zoning.
And probably your neighbors could have cared less and.
Correct. I mean, that's my opinion, but I never asked them.
Well, yeah.
But I can say that for the 3 different houses I've lived in, every single one, there was something that we wanted to do for our family, we were not able to do because of zoning.
I'll ditto that, same thing.
what
Yeah.
examples, just like quick examples,
Um,
additions?
Like a setback issue or something like that, or?
So, let's see, so one example, which our change in zoning last year, so we lived on Mill Street for a number of years. We had a 9/10 of an acre lot, and you need to have a half acre in order to subdivide it. So we at one point thought about we were thinking about subdividing and building a new house for us, and then you'd have the duplex next door. That was not allowed because we had 9/10 of an acre, not a full acre.
Okay,
And I bought a beautiful 18-acre farm in R1 and with a beautiful south slope, and I was gonna put in a solar array. And everybody, this whole room is full of people against it. And,
Not personally, but because the regs wouldn't,
well, there was nothing in the zoning reg at the time for solar arrays.
Right.
Other than
It was
They-
commercial kicked in.
it was the
That's-
commercial.
the light industrial kicked in because I was gonna sell the electricity was gonna
Correct.
come
Okay.
off the property.
Right,
That's
put
what
it on
they
the
did.
So
grid.
so I tried to get a, you know,
Variance.
variance for light industrial, and that didn't go over at all.
You know, and you have these little things that, you know, you have to run to the ZBA for, and 90% of the people don't even know what a ZBA is, and are very intimidated, you know, they
Oh,
look
yeah.
at those questions you have to fill out and meet, it's like, well, forget it. You know, and it's,
And the
very
variance,
intimidating.
to use the variance as kind of zoning, which is kind of what Enfield does.
Right.
The variance is meant to be difficult. And sometimes we have ZBA that takes it, I mean, they tend to blow in the wind a little bit. Maybe very rigid, like, that's not an unnecessary hardship, no. But then somebody wants to do this, oh, okay, we'll let you do that, you know, like, it's just, I don't think it's good
personalities.
policy.
Come into a big play on the
Sure.
ZBA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which shouldn't, but does.
It's an elected ZBA.
So the rewrite is to help them.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways to allow for expansions of non-conforming use.
Right.
Through a special exception versus a variance, allow for movement in the setback with a special exception versus a
Right.
variance.
Right.
Things like that. There's conditional use permits that stay with the planning board and some DBA.
Lot line adjustments on non-conforming
Right.
lots.
all we gotta do is write them.
Right.
Yeah, and sort of along those lines, I don't know if it's even possible. In the stated purpose of this, the zoning regs, the very first paragraph, it lists out, and I think they just came cut and paste from whatever the state had at that time. Is those set in stone, or can they be
The
expanded?
purpose statements,
Yeah,
those are just parroted out of the state statute.
yeah. Cause that was one of the things that.
Yeah.
On the Z, yeah, right, this for
Article 101.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
briefly, and
Yeah, those.
it was sort of like,
Yeah.
the ZPA was sort of like looking at, well, it doesn't meet the zoning because of this paragraph. Somewhere in this paragraph, someone referenced,
The harmonious.
yeah, the harmonious setting and
Right.
whatnot there. And those are really broad statements.
Sure.
You can find whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know if those can be amended.
Well,
Let's make it
if
more-
it's state statute, it's state statute, but it goes back to why is that person there? Well, because the setback's a problem. So you solve the setback problem, you solve the issue.
Yeah, yeah.
Or if it's a use issue that should have been allowed, but it's not, then deal with it from a use perspective, and then they don't have to go to the CPA.
And I think one of the things I've seen, I don't know if you've seen this, is purpose statements specific to the zoning district that say, that are in line to some degree with the master plan, that say, this is what this district is about.
Oh, yeah.
And then the standards are there to govern.
Right.
As opposed to one big broad standard for the whole.
Right,
town.
which is what
Right.
they were running into.
Right.
I was like, you have the R1, but it doesn't really say
What,
why
what
there's,
is the
why
function?
an R1 exists versus a rule, which is also one of my questions here. We need to come up with a definition of rural.
Yeah, people are working on that.
Or not use
His
the
whole
word.
grad school.
Not
Yeah,
use
or say what it should mean, right.
Right.
So I'll expand on that a little bit. So another theme when you talk to people in town is most of us, the majority of us, not all, but the majority of us moved here. And then we chose to stay and we like living here and we love this town.
Yeah.
And most people like the way their section of town is. So we don't necessarily need a formal definition of rural, but people like the way it is. They like the traditional settlement pattern of a dense village surrounded by open space of one form or another. And they like having the conservation section along the ridge, and we like having, clean lakes. And they like all those things. So when we look at, what do people want for zoning? We do want the zoning to match what's there now. People like that, right? So they shouldn't have to have an exception because every lot around the lake needs to be 3 acres. That doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, people like having sort of lower density in the outreaches of town. Right? They don't, that's not where people have asked to have a high density thing. But people in the village who like to walk around and want to have a coffee shop to walk to, where we have sewer capacity and water, people want to have, you know, it's a very traditional New England settlement pattern
Right.
of wanting that sort of the dense village area. We happen to have it defined by water and sewer mostly. And then, but I think if we look at what we have now, that's largely what people want. They just want more flexibility within the properties that they have. And for just to be less complicated.
That's helpful. I do want to get to talk about the workforce housing piece that you want to go over, Mark. Before we do that, so if what we're hearing is it's a light review on the audit side, and it's really more thinking about how we recraft a new ordinance to do exactly what you're saying. Do you think you're retaining these districts largely as they are, like maybe changing the boundaries?
No.
Okay,
No.
so you're not. My concern is I looked at the future land use strategy you have in the master plan, and there are, there's like 14 potential districts.
Yes.
You see 5?
Well, I think that's what we sort of have been talking, we talk about, well, right, so conservation,
That big area.
right, well, and there might be a few other spots in town.
And that's kind of defined.
Correct, but that'd be one that we don't wanna forget about, because it needs to be there.
Yeah.
Industrial on 89.
Yep.
A village district along the water and sewer. A lakes district around the lakes. And a generically stated rural district,
Thank you so
which
much.
we'll use a different word because that's.
Housing district.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, there were a couple others that,
Low density, low density.
there were a couple others that.
Yeah.
We may want to
Right.
single out. One was Shaker Village.
Mhm.
And that, the reason for that centers around the historical nature. of
Yeah.
Properties there and its history and so we wanted to make sure we talked to all the stakeholders there.
Yeah, but it'll come up for sure.
What do you guys want to see your zoning do for you in the future to either preserve or enhance or whatever that area? It's a really unique community. The other was Enfield Center, which may be somewhat similar to the village, except they don't have town water and sewer there. And then we
And it's
talked about,
much smaller,
yeah, much smaller.
much more compact.
And then we talked about Eastman, perhaps having a very light touch with our zoning there, if I understood what people were saying.
Yeah, they pretty much do their own.
Exactly.
Right, just
It's
based
a
on.
homeowners
Yeah,
association.
just cut and paste what Eastman Association says you can do on your property
Yes,
and make it
overlay.
part of our zoning.
As an overlay, maybe? Just, yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're back up to 8. Right.
What was it, Bar Harbor has like 50 something?
Barber is 42.
42.
Yeah. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes it. They're trying to cut it in half.
And they're in a housing meltdown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I just was looking
Yeah.
for that context, because we may want to spend some time at the January meeting and just thinking about this, and so it gives us something to be thinking about beforehand to have questions. Because our understanding of this project was to kind of look at redistricting and thinking about these districts kind of after your forums. But hearing what we're hearing, I would do it
Yeah,
earlier,
we do need to
use
do
your
it.
forums
Part of
to
the forum.
let people really kind of help shape
Yeah.
it and inform it and get some buy-in and ask questions and
Yeah,
that's different. We didn't know that.
Right.
Now we do.
And along those lines, one of my other quick notes I want to get out there is the board has been having discussion regarding where the zoning line is drawn. Does it follow pre-existing lots or do you follow Mets and bounds?
Right.
Well, a set distance from not Mets and bounds, let me rephrase that. A set distance from a set boundary line, physical boundary. A road, lake, stream, things like that. Something like a surveyor would reference for his measurement from. Versus following pre-existing lot lines.
Okay.
And I understand there's pluses and
Cause that
minuses.
has come up fairly frequently since I've been here, is that you've got a lot that is actually partially within one district and another.
Yeah.
And so I've
Yeah.
interpreted that, where does the building set? Does it set in the district or outside the district?
Right.
And another thing that we've talked about, and, you know, if you have a zoning district boundary that runs right down the middle of the street, and one side allows a guy to do a commercial operation, and on the other side, a guy wants to put in, real example, auto repair or motorcycle shop, he can't do it. So do we consider some sort of a transition zone between zoning districts?
It's just gonna add more districts.
Yes.
More
Yeah.
confusion. There's always gonna be a line somewhere.
Right.
Right,
Somebody's
and
gonna
that-
be on
and that-
one side,
And that
somebody's
point of,
gonna be on the other,
right,
and
exactly.
they're not gonna be compatible.
I'm within 10 feet of the transition zone.
That's-
I need
So-
it,
so-
you know, so,
Right,
Now-
I mean, that's why I lean towards set distance, because people do property boundary adjustment, line adjustments. They subdivide lots, what happens to the line?
Very
That's my
few,
argument against that.
very few
Right.
though.
Yeah, but,
And the ones that occur that happen to be on a zoning district boundary are probably even you.
well.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's. I don't know what-
that's all,
I don't know what-
that's
that's
always
up
a
to you
struggle,
guys,
yeah.
You guys think of the pros and cons and.
right,
I don't think there is one answer that it works, that's appropriate. I think each community is different because
Mhm.
the layout of the community, you know, what's there for lots. You know, you have that big lot up by the lake, you know, if it's gonna be the lot line, you have a 200-acre parcel in the zone, you know, is that appropriate or not? Or do you want 200 feet off the center line, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then where to stop that commercial use, you know, is it across the street? But if you stop it after a quarter mile down the street, and then the next house is residential, that
Right.
conflict point is gonna be there.
Yeah.
You know, and where do you stop it? I remember a situation in my hometown where it was a residential right next to a commercial property, and they wanted to move it up one. It was like, well, where do we stop? Because then that person's gonna wanna move, and you just keep moving it.
Yes.
Right,
Right.
right.
Because it never stops, so, you know, they put in a subdivision and it's still there, so it has to stop somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, maybe based on just geography,
yeah,
determines where the line's gonna be drawn.
yeah,
You've been hearing a lot about building and also that people live here because they like it. But I have a concern that with the ADUs going in and doubling density, that we have no, it's not balanced with any thought to historic preservation or compatibility of what is put on that lot with the older homes. And I'm not alone in this. The also Enfield Center is a prime candidate for its own historic district. It's been changed very little. It's a snapshot in time. We have, in the last year, about a year ago, we got the 3 historic buildings that in town as one historic district. There's a townhouse, a 2-story schoolhouse, and the Union Church. So somewhere it would be nice to have a balance to respecting those older properties. If you have a magic wand, you
yeah,
can
it's
just
not,
say,
that's tough.
oh, yes.
Well, the town has got a couple of historic districts now, right?
In fact, our Main Street district is one of the largest in the state of New Hampshire.
Okay,
Well,
so
yeah.
to what effect that has on what people put up there, I guess is determined by,
It has zero of,
Zero.
because it really doesn't have any teeth to that ordinance, right?
right, and we have not even made any suggestions like, it would be nice if you didn't cover up the historic details on the house. Or if you need to put on a bathroom or a garage, that it not be in the front or, you know, blend in with the neighborhood. We don't even give them, for those who can't think of it themselves, a suggestion of what would be nice.
Yes, my concern, if you do anything that's sort of even refers to historic preservation and into the zoning, the whole package of it shot down. That's just sort of my sense.
Have you done any have you created any voluntary standards and shopped them around to people?
Well,
Incentives
let
for
me
people
say,
to
I've
do
been
something?
quite preaching to my own choir.
Sure.
I'm on the Heritage Commission also, and I'm on the Mascoma Valley Preservation Board.
Okay.
So we've been having, we've been learning grant writing 101. That's been painful. So we are working on some projects but it's more rescuing the buildings.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
need physical work and money.
We'll keep it in mind for sure. I can understand the intent. Yeah, but it, as Mark said, it is hard. And if it would torpedo your efforts, but there's something you could do in parallel to help those that are open to it, that might be a good strategy.
Unfortunately, I actually think Kurt's right. That
Yeah, I
it's,
mean, just trying to do the Enfield Center stuff was a struggle,
Mhm.
and that was just designating 3 buildings.
Okay. All right, in the interest of time, workforce housing, why do we care? Why do we need to do workforce housing, Mark?
I'm excited.
I didn't see it in the zoning ordinance at all. Unless I missed it.
You didn't
It's
see it.
not there.
It's not there.
It's not there.
No, it's-
So that was a state law
Yep.
adopted 12 years ago.
Yep.
And it wasn't, and it's a law that says, it doesn't say, you know, if you feel like it, it's shall.
Right.
So right now, you are not in compliance with state statute, which is a problem.
I didn't know there was a law.
12 years ago,
You're not the only, you're not the only
and
town.
you were given a year and a half.
Books.
I don't remember seeing you at the Loon presentation that Steve Keach and I gave.
Well,
When we went over our handbook.
Yeah, why didn't he inform us?
It was packed audience and everyone was ashen. You know, luckily we're in the middle of a great recession, so no one was building anything. So actually the timing was perfect because
Right.
no one was doing anything anyway. However, that was 12, 13 years ago.
Which RSA was that?
2010. So it mandates that workforce housing, that zoning allow a reasonable and realistic opportunity for the creation of workforce housing. And the definition of that is dependent upon where you are in the state, which I didn't look up for how it applies here, but it's based on HUD, area median income levels, et cetera. So in your largest zoning, I'd say probably is the green. If I had to take a guess. That has to be allowed in that zone, and you need a multifamily zone. So you know, if you need to be able to build a home that meets the definition of someone who can afford at 100% of the area median income. And for rental property, you gotta be able to build either condominiums or apartments to meet 60% of the area median income. And if that's not allowed, then you have, you know, obviously open yourself up to for housing issues, but not only federal law, but also the state. The town of Brookline, which is next to Milford, just got in a big tangle, with a workforce housing project, which they went to the planning board for a discussion, conceptual discussion for townhomes. We're gonna be townhome apartments. Within 2 months, there was a special town meeting put forth. Growth control ordinance adopted, and they rewrote the zoning for workforce housing. They just settled with the Tamposi company for $610,000 in damages. Their lawsuit cost to date $1.1 million. So they spent $1.7 million, in my view, wasted money for how many fire trucks could you buy? How many roads could you fix?
It's a new grader.
You know, how many schools could you fix with that type of money? I mean, I think that was an extreme example, but it's something that has to be a part of this initiative to get you back into compliance, because you want to drive the bus. You don't want someone driving the bus for you. So, and I think based on what I'm hearing, that's, you know, I think you're gonna be open to do that. And it's basically, it's crafting the language in a density that's gonna provide enough incentive and density to make it economically viable so that can happen. You don't have to build a thing. You don't,
Just have to have.
you just have to have it in place.
Right.
I mean, I'm a consultant for the town of Hollis. We got them to make the zoning change.
Yeah.
We only have one project, it's condominium development. It's allowed in, you know, vast majority of the town, which is what's mandated. No one's ever taken advantage of it. That doesn't matter. That's not the town's fault. But it's there and it meets, that's all you gotta do.
Well, if I'm reading the room right here, in our village district up here, we've been talking about going around with the idea of not having any minimum lot sizes, nor any restrictions on what you can put on the lot you do have, except for what might impact it in terms of setbacks and frontage and water and sewer, things like that. And in the rural district, the only thing we've talked about doing, I don't think anyone suggested we can't have multifamily in the rural district. It's just always been about how do you incentivize or nudge or push a developer towards, instead of taking a 100-acre parcel divided into 25 different individual parcels with lots of roads, clustering them all in one corner, and then perhaps not even caring how many houses built on there, as long as 80% of the land is preserved, or something like that. That's kind of what.
Cluster house.
That's our cluster development,
Yeah,
which we have.
yeah. So the only thing.
But it's an option now, right? You have to.
No, it's a
No.
shall.
It's a shall? Okay.
Yeah.
Shall.
I think it's what, above 10
I think
10 units?
10
Good.
lot,
And I
10
suspect,
units, not just lots. It has to be built. Has to have houses.
So anything over 10 is, it's
It's
shall.
the shall.
Yeah,
Shall.
yeah, but 10 structures.
and I suspect what the developers are gonna find under that scenario is very favorable. They're gonna gladly wanna build that way, right?
Right.
Some of the developments we have in here, I'm thinking the one up on Shaker Hill Road, it gets level.
Mascoma Heights,
Right? No, before then,
before, Mountain View.
Mountain View.
yeah. So a road that goes into a development, there's, looks like 2 to 3 acre lots.
Yeah.
Single family homes. My guess is that's not very economical to build in.
No, it's not.
And so I think we're just kind of naturally driving ourselves towards accomplishing this workforce housing without even really stating that we're doing it.
Well, in Grafton County, because of the median income, it's pretty high. The number's pretty high as to, where the 100% is. Only because of the two large institutions, Hitchcock and College, has driven up the, which is why affordable housing isn't affordable in Grafton County, because you can basically charge anything. And it fits within the affordable housing number.
Another point that you might want to write down and take into consideration is that we have a lot of land that has ledge or hydric soils
Slope.
and slope, which means that the amount of development that can be put on it is limited by natural factors.
Yeah.
So we can say, yeah, in our R5
Well, that's,
district,
is what it is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
What it is.
yes,
I mean, if you allow quarter acre, half acre lots on that, it doesn't,
it's not gonna work.
it's not gonna work, so, I mean.
Yeah.
But even
No.
on those, you can find 25% of it that's buildable. Right.
Yeah,
So, on the state law, is it, it kicks in if a developer comes in and says he wants to build X amount of units and charge as and build them as affordable units?
well, it's not something that kicks in, it has to be in place, it has to be, he needs to be able to. I'm doing work, we're doing work in Bedford right now, so I know that number. For owner occupied, it's $342,000.
Mhm.
The house can't sell, so that can be either a condo, doesn't have to be a single family detached house.
Townhouse
It's
floors.
owner occupied.
Yeah.
So the owner occupied price point's 342.
Yeah.
So the zoning has to be in place to allow somebody to be able to build a home for 342. One of the problems in Bedford is lots are selling for 300,
Right. Exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
So, and they need to address that because of an issue a few years ago where a petition zoning got rid of their workforce, so they're out of compliance as well. It was by petition, it was against the planning board's recommendation, but voters said,
Right.
yes, no, we're not gonna do it,
Right.
and
I think,
So-
I think the question Kurt's asking though is, do those regulations only apply when they're selling them at that rate? Or do the zoning regulations have to apply to everybody? So they have to allow that to happen, but they can.
not
choose
every
to-
house has to be that,
No,
no.
no, no,
Right,
no, not, does the zoning, like, say you have to have an eighth of an acre in order to make it affordable?
Right.
Can they say, oh, well, we want an eighth of an acre, but we're gonna sell $1 million homes, or do they have to sell $342,000 homes on that eighth of an acre? I think that's the question Kurt's
So
asking.
Yeah, yes. Can say in the rural area, the DES, I believe, has a sort of standard for on-site water sewer.
With the best soils, in our state, you can probably get down to maybe 28,000 square feet with on-site well and septic. I mean, that's the best soils.
And what is that? What's that in acreage?
Half acre.
Half acre, a little less,
Okay.
43,000 is an acre.
Right.
Okay. So say in the rural area, a developer comes in and says, I want to build a multifamily apartments. 5+
Yeah, you
five,
don't have to allow that in your rural zone.
even if he says, I'm gonna make
Wait,
this.
no, because-
I'm gonna build it as affordable, so it has to be X amount of units to make it affordable.
You have to allow for a multifamily area somewhere in the community, and that's gonna be,
Okay.
and that's gonna be up in that edge of town where there's water and sewer.
Okay,
Yes,
so that's where
yeah.
That's where that's,
Somewhere in the
And
community.
that's what's
You
been
cannot-
identified in the master plan, is that people do want affordable housing.
Yeah.
We do want to make sure that and we do want to increase, but we want to preserve that village. And a lot of, there is worry about the folks that live out on Bog Road and George Hill, that a developer is gonna come along and buy up, and put out a big giant condominium, which wouldn't make sense out there too, because if you need affordable housing, you may not have a car, like services.
Right.
You need to have, so if we can, but.
well,
in the
that type
master
of
plan-
affordable, higher density affordable can be owner occupied or rental.
Yeah.
I mean, that's gonna make more sense.
Where we've
And
got the
route-
water and
Right,
sewer, so
yeah.
it's not
Yeah,
even
but that's
using
coming from us, but
capacity.
my concern is the developer, like you're saying, the developer comes in and says, no, this is what I wanna build. And I'm gonna make X amount of units affordable, so you have to allow it.
Yeah.
If you have to allow a multifamily zone. So if you meet that obligation
Somewhere in town.
somewhere in
Okay,
town,
somewhere in
you
town.
can't say, well, I want it over here. Well,
So you
Yeah.
could make the Route 4 district
Right.
affordable housing
Right.
or workforce housing.
Right, and it doesn't have to be the entire downtown.
No.
It doesn't say
Yeah,
a certain percentage
right, you define where.
where it could be, and it makes sense if you have sewer water.
Right.
Water bus
All right,
line.
that was my concern, that
Yeah.
it was a town-wide.
And, you know, most towns, it's a percentage. If you have a 100-unit development, 25% has to be
Mhm.
workforce and the rest of market.
Right.
The two projects in Bedford, one's 25% workforce, the other one's 33. They went from 33 to 25.
Who determines that?
The town.
Well, I mean, can you just say,
Resident.
I think we've got our,
We may be getting into this. a little
right,
bit.
so we don't want complicated formulas.
Right.
We want to comply with state law.
Right.
I think that's, and so I think we're getting, so if we can comply with state law by making
Right.
the water and sewer area comply with this law, we're gonna be fine.
logically.
But we don't want fancy formulas, because that gets really complicated, and that's not something that we.
Yeah, well, I mean, the workforce housing ordinance is gonna have to be a little bit complicated because there's gonna have to be someone watching over
The percentage.
the percentage and
Totally.
who's vetting.
So are we required by law to have a percentage of workforce housing in a certain part of town?
There's no number.
Right, so, but
Why do we
we,
need an ordinance?
right,
Because you have to allow it to,
well, no,
Well, if
we
we
will have,
allow it,
we allow it,
we
but
don't
we're
need to
not going to
specifically say
require it.
it's workforce housing.
yeah, you do. Because you have to make sure the zoning, the developer will be able to build the density in order to bring that price, that
But
price
so what,
point in.
what Tim has said is we've talked about having the village not have density requirements. Not have lot sizes, control it through maybe road frontage and setbacks, and not have unit requirements, so they can build what they can on a lot that makes sense. Which sounds like it would meet that requirement,
But
because,
that's one of your smallest districts, and you need in the largest district to have a provision
Right,
as well.
right, but that doesn't have to be
the same.
multifamily
Doesn't have to be
too.
the same.
Who's concerned
Okay,
that?
It could be single family work.
It could be single family, sure.
And it might be a tweak to your clustering provision to allow for the density to get to that price point.
Well, that's, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
so, okay, yeah, I
That'll
mean,
work.
so
Why,
yeah.
so here's a,
but I will say that basically means infinite density in this town, to get to like new single-family homes that are built that are quite modest, they're over 400, they're almost
Sure.
$500,000 here.
so just a basic question.
Yeah.
Why are we concerned about having multifamily in the rural district?
I don't,
Cause I'm not.
I don't think you are, I don't think you're, but what came out of the master plan is that, and the zoning board might not be, but there is folks that live in those areas, that live out, don't want to be in a high density area.
I think,
They want to have, and then there are conservation committees, there's people looking at, what are the, what is, wildlife, yeah, wildlife
Right, so, I
corridors
mean, that's-
and like, so that's all. You could probably, you could put it there and say, we have to have this as a requirement, and then the zoning board is in compliance with the state and you deal with it. I'm just saying that if we're looking at that, that,
and the conflict is
You're gonna
what
have that
Kurt brought up,
conflict.
which is the density required to meet that price
Right.
is essentially whatever the developer says.
mhm.
Because there's no way we can say, well, your costs are this.
Right.
So you get this density, because that's not how building costs work.
So we couldn't use the Shed Street properties because they're.
Well,
they're
that's not a
close.
zoning, I mean, we can, the
We
town
could
can choose to.
spot- We were gonna spot zone for it.
Well,
You did.
We did.
we did,
We did.
but they're saying it has to be in the largest zone in town.
Well, that's just the multifamily, there has to be a multifamily zone.
Mhm.
And then your largest zone, whatever your largest zone is, you also have to allow workforce housing. It
Right.
doesn't have to be multifamily. If you want to, it can,
Right.
but it doesn't have to be.
It could
So
be
now we
single.
understand how a town got to 42 districts.
Yeah,
You can have, so you could have single family as long as it's affordable workforce housing in the district.
Yeah, I
In
mean,
your
in
large
Hollis,
district.
with the ordinance I wrote in Hollis is, you know, in the rural zone, it's a mandatory open space provision.
Yeah.
So say if you get 20 houses, you do the math and you get 20 houses, you get a 20% density bonus. Those extra 20% units have to be workforce.
Okay, so the extra 4 units, you have to
Yeah.
have 4 more.
So
units
those,
that
if you
are
wanna do it,
affordables.
those can be affordable, they can be as small as the soils will allow.
Yeah.
And
They
other,
could be duplexes
They
or
could do-
quads.
yeah, they
They
could
could be
be-
mixed in with single family.
Yeah,
So that's very different than saying you have to allow density that provides affordable pricing though.
Yeah.
That's the opposite. That's saying if it's affordable, you can do it. Not saying you have to have zoning that allows them to build affordable housing. That's a very different.
And that example was brought up before about if you have a certain percentage of workforce housing, your density can be greater. My response to that was always,
Just
well, if you're happy with the density.
Just allow it.
Great, just allow it. Just allow the high density everywhere.
But a lot of communities don't want to do that, so they use it as an incentive.
As a way, yeah.
to create
Yeah, I understand
units, right?
why they're doing it.
Yeah.
I just don't think we need to do that here.
But after we saw what happened over at Shaker Village, and you can hear the person snore in the bedroom next door, they're so close to each other.
But Linda, those houses are selling for.
Right, people are buying, people are buying them,
Want
so,
that. They want to live there. You and I don't, but
They do,
they're
You're right.
marketed.
right.
they don't have a vacancy.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think probably what happened at Shaker Village is more than likely about the best thing that could. I mean, it's just a really attractive development surrounded by some really nice looking historical buildings. And they kind of have a nice,
Right.
thing going.
All right, next, you wanna,
Next.
so we don't really need to talk about the audit. We've kind of touched on that. As far as other next steps, we'll work through our notes from tonight and some of our observations from looking at the master plan and the zoning and kind of create a punch list that, and we can decide with all of you at the January meeting, like which things to really focus on. But we're getting a lot of direction about how you want to
it's
start.
very, very helpful.
So,
Not a lack of opinion here.
no, but
That's
luckily,
why we came.
luckily, it's kind of all saying the same thing. It's nice, there's not a lot of division. I
It's-
think the master plan work you've done has helped you all think through a lot of this, and your work together as a planning board, obviously, is very good. We may want to do a little bit of a mapping exercise. We're gonna try to join by teams for some of these meetings, just to reduce our drive time and use the budget that way.
Right.
So you might have to be our lead mapper. Or have somebody here, but, it'd be nice to get some, maybe spend a little time and play around with those 5 that Eric kind of named, and then talk about, do we need to be thinking about some overlays and other stuff? Can we talk for a minute before we go about the stakeholder meeting in February? So typically, these stakeholder meetings for the HOP grants have been to try to build some awareness around the need for housing, to answer questions and kind of play around with the workforce housing law like we just were. It seems like you're ahead of that
Yeah,
based on
we're
the
beyond
housing
that.
chapter.
Yeah.
How do we want to use this stakeholder meeting?
To convince the people that show up that the ideas that we ultimately display were theirs.
So do you want to use it more as a listening session? We'll
Yeah.
share what we're doing, but then,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
What do you
And
think? What do you want to do with
what do
zoning
you
in the
think?
town? What are your ideas?
I mean, I think we should, present them with 3 or 4 different options as a starting point for a discussion. But if half the people want to go off in a way that we haven't thought about, let's let them go there and see what happens.
Yeah, I think a good starting discussion, opening discussion would be some preliminary lines drawn on a map. Figure, so people can say, this is what we're looking at. I mean, that's.
As far as districts?
Yeah, as far as districts, yeah.
What do you think?
So, because they're gonna say,
Right.
I live here and I like this and I don't want this next to me.
But
I mean, NIMBY is.
I think we need to be prepared to answer the question of why do we need to do anything?
Right.
to go from that question to here's the map we've drawn is a lot in one meeting.
No, I understood, but you're gonna get that, right? You're gonna get that, and maybe we talk about the law, the fact that we're not compliant, right? And as one of the things, and we all agree, or the master plan research showed that we need work, housing, blah, blah, blah.
We need affordable housing in the town.
Well, but also, I mean, everybody thinks what's there is fine until they try to do something.
Right.
So it's those people that are going to the ZBA.
Well, there's probably,
Yeah.
you know, 6 or 8 things of why you're doing this, and you
Right.
just told us tonight. I mean, most of the lots are non-conforming.
Right,
You
right.
have to go to the ZBA to do anything.
Yeah.
You can't even put an addition for your mother on the back because the setbacks don't work.
Right.
I mean, people can relate to that, right?
That's what
I
I'm
mean, you got the
trying to say.
workforce housing law, but you got all these other things that have been
For sure.
struggling.
Yeah.
So that's why you're doing it.
Okay.
And maybe there's more than, is there more than one stakeholder?
There's one state, because we have such a compressed timeline and we're trying to use this as much as money as possible, working on the zoning. To get you that, we're gonna be like, whatever it is, Cinderella in July. Because the funding has to be spent by then. We're trying,
So
in each of the stakeholder meetings, the outreach we have to do for a February stakeholder meeting, which we don't even have a date and location yet. Like the ramp up to that's pretty severe, and then we're gonna do multiple forums in like April-ish, April or early May.
Yeah, so
That's
that's the
not
only
much
time
time
we're
to
gonna touch
change.
the.
It's not the only time we'll talk
It's
to
the
the public.
first time.
It's the first time. And it should be kind of your core 20, 30 people. I don't know if you have a running list.
We do,
Yeah,
You do?
We do.
Okay.
and that's where we start.
Well, the reason I asked the question is, I had envisioned a stakeholder meeting with, say, just the Lake District stakeholders, the homeowners associations, people that own property around the lakes.
A separate meeting.
Come to a meeting, we're gonna talk about, we're thinking about a zoning district specifically to the lake. This is kind of what we have in mind. What do you guys see as problems? What do you want us to do? And have a free ranging discussion about that, see what comes of it. Similar thing with the village. Similar thing with the Shaker Village people. Maybe the Enfield Center people, obviously the Eastman people. I mean, there's these groups where you couldn't just take one stakeholder meeting and say, okay, for the next half hour, we're gonna talk about the lake, and now we're gonna move to Eastman, and then, you know.
That's why people typically don't do a whole zoning rewrite in 6 months. Right. So I hear what you're saying and you're right. You're 100% right. But we have to get creative because we
So
don't,
the way to do that is you have one stakeholder meeting and you break them out into groups. And
which
you
we can do with
say
the forums.
the
Right.
village people over here
Yeah.
and
Yep.
the whomever else over here, like, and you're all in one meeting, but they're not in one meeting. You can't have all those people in a room
I
together
mean, we can,
and have that
Here's a-
constructive conversation.
It may be a stupid idea, but I'll just say it anyways. Why can't we as a planning board do that?
that was,
And
can.
keep them,
You definitely
that was,
and we'll say in our first in our second meeting every month.
Yeah.
For the next 3 months, we're gonna have X group here.
Mm.
And we're gonna
Yeah.
spend 45 minutes.
right.
We'll get your Lake District, we'll get the village and the Enfield Center group here in another meeting. We can get the Shaker people in another meeting. And that
Yeah.
gets us.
And you
that
guys
gets
could be
us
on
to-
Zoom, just listen.
Yeah.
Or, yeah,
Or
Or
just
we
give
can
us a
take the
list,
idea.
here's the questions that we should be asking.
yeah,
That might
Um,
save you time.
If you could do that in a parallel track, it would
Yeah.
extend the
Yeah.
time that we have.
yeah,
yeah,
Get that additional buy-in, and then we could also do, as Lindsay said, use the forums to some degree to provide those area-specific feedback loops. And even if you live in one area, you probably have an opinion on other areas.
Exactly.
So you wanna
Right.
comment on those. And at those forums, we wanna engage people in the remaining topics for the
For the-
master plan.
best.
We wanna try to get people out and do basically what we talked with David and Brad about was doing the same exact forum, 2 locations, 2 different days, and making it broad and interesting and fun. Should be a little bit fun. It doesn't have to be drudgery to come out and weigh in on the housing and the zoning issues as well as inform the chapters.
Yeah, so the techniques that we were using for the master plan, when we did do community-based stuff outside of the survey, was much more, experiential, so hands-on, Post-it notes.
Yeah.
Small groups, asking questions, identifying things, so, obviously, we weren't able to take everything that was said, but we did, we had this whole wall covered
Sure.
with the feedback, and of just Post-it notes, and that helped us to identify those really big themes. The things that, like Linda was talking about, people want to preserve our historic buildings. They may not want your, everybody's opinion on what I can do with my house, because this is New Hampshire and I own this house and I don't want the Historic Preservation Committee in my business, but we want to preserve the historic buildings that are designated as historic, because that's part of our town. And that's what's helped us to pass and fix Whitney Hall. I mean, there's things like that, but that comes out and we can, and you get that, the power of the conglomerate. But yeah, that's where, I guess I was wondering, what are the 20-30 people, like, what is the stakeholder meeting? So if that's the forums, where it's more general public or different people, and so kind of what do you mean by stakeholder meetings? That sounds more invitational.
Usually
Like,
it's-
you are inviting very specific people,
And those are,
like developers, and
they're people who will inform you and be opinion leaders in the community that who you want to have start getting engaged and going out and talking to the groups they're involved in.
I thought there was a list.
Yeah, so there was the list that Rob sent it by email. That's the list we're gonna work from, and we'll.
That's a good sort of beginning jumping off point.
yeah, so that's different than the village and the
Right.
Shaker Landing.
That's a
and
third
that.
Right.
So
a third.
that's like those communities.
Oh, yeah.
But, so
Right.
the stakeholder meeting sounds like, that's where it's, I mean, I don't know what your list is, but. sounds good.
Lake Association president and
Yeah.
a couple people,
They're Local developers.
yeah,
and People
a
that
couple
have.
people from the zoning board that get to hear all
Realtors.
this stuff all the time.
Yep.
Where and when should we do that meeting in February? Is that something we should work with Rob on? Do we want to talk about it now?
Well, if he needs
Here's
the
February.
electronics, the screen and stuff, it's gonna have to be here. Cause the only other real place is with the,
Community.
community building and it's not wired.
And the acoustics suck in
Yeah,
there.
you don't need a screen unless you need to show the meeting on the screen. Like,
Does it
we
have-
would
That's
meet with
what
them
we
in
did.
person.
We could, I mean, I've got a
Some
projector.
people do want to attend a meeting. Do we have anyone tonight?
Nope.
Nope.
Yeah, well,
But a
they-
stakeholder meeting is not a public meeting.
No, it's an
It's
invitation.
an invitation meeting, so it doesn't need to be public.
Right.
It's really more of like a work
Yeah.
session with us, a group of the public, a cross section, kind of like based on who you're naming, Brad.
We can do it here.
I think we
Definitely
could do it
reconfigure this
here.
room.
Yeah, you could
Yeah,
fit.
yeah, I think-
Get 75, 80 people in here if we
Yeah.
reconfigure it.
Well.
But we're not gonna have that many.
Right.
I would try to
85
keep
would
it
be
to like,
cozy.
if you
yeah,
want-
try to keep it to 25 or so, so you can hear from them.
Yeah, the
Yeah, about
community
25,
building.
I think.
There's a sign that the fire marshal put up, I think.
That's what people want.
And is this a
Somewhere.
daytime or a nighttime meeting based on who you're inviting?
Will be
Probably a
Okay,
evening.
so we want to get that, can you pull together some potential
Or
dates?
weekend,
Or weekend? I suppose.
Saturday afternoon, other charrettes have been done like Saturday morning or afternoon.
Have you had good luck with weekends? Because we have tried it time and again and not had good luck with weekends.
We did. with
We
the
had
master
real
plan
good luck with
at,
our
uh,
master
the
plan
community
stuff.
building.
We did, but we did it, it was long and we did two, and even there, we still had mostly the usual suspects.
Right.
Not a lot of anybody outside that, so,
But this is gonna be invitation, so.
yeah, this is invitation.
This will be a little different.
Okay, we'll work on it. We'll have more details to report back to you at the January meeting,
Okay.
so that
Okay.
you can help us spread the word. We can work up invitation materials. We can help with all that stuff and run that through David, and you can share drafts with people to whatever degree, you want to. So we can help get the word out. Good.
Okay.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Interesting.
You guys still wanna do this?
Definitely learned some things tonight. Project feels different, but it's better that it be
Not
different
to
in the
us.
first meeting.
Different's good.
Do you still think it's an accomplishable goal,
It's
given the
tight.
time frame?
It's tight.
Yeah, tight,
Tight.
yes, we know that.
The good news is I think even if it's tight, we're going to give you as much finished product as possible in July.
Right.
But you can continue to manipulate.
Right.
We're
Right, it's not,
providing all the
it's not
final-
written in granite.
Right,
Mhm.
right. And then you can decide if it feels like too much and you don't want to take it.
Something about quicksand, that would be nice.
It's all editable.
So if there are big stumbling blocks, can you write something that's reasonable and mark it for us to work on?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, especially if there's still some options, like you
I
go this way or
mean,
that way.
Right.
Yeah,
But in July, if you decide you're gonna go to 2025
Yeah,
town
we
meeting,
got 9
Yeah,
months.
we've got a long time.
you do, but you also have to start getting it out there and refining it with people
Well, yeah,
pretty
you
quick.
gotta have,
Mhm.
Right.
you gotta have your public meetings
Because
by
that fall goes fast.
November.
Right. Okay. And as far as the master plan piece, so Liz from our office, will be kind of leading that so that we keep our heads on straight and we'll both be involved in both projects. But I think she wants to coordinate with Rob and the two of you to get the task force together.
Yeah.
Get the band back together or new members of the band, whoever they are. But we're hoping to do that relatively soon.
Okay,
So that they can start pulling background information on all the chapters and you all can get a couple months in so that the forums can kind of meet up.
Yeah.
And we can
Mhm.
try to use some of the HOP money to help also support outreach and writing of these chapters to some degree.
Thank you, guys.
Great.
Thank you very much. Great to see you.
Thanks for being so engaged and involved.
Absolutely, very, very helpful.
Yeah.
I told you there were planners out there someplace.
Found them. They're right here.
They cast a wider net.
Rob said he wouldn't stop calling if we didn't show up.
Good.
Thanks for coming,
Thank you.
gentlemen.
You're
We
welcome.
appreciate
Have a
it.
happy, safe new year.
You
You
too.
Thank you.
Hopefully it'll snow soon.
It would be nice,
I'm
but
not
not
holding my
tonight.
breath.
Right.
Watch out for the fog.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so continuing along with our agenda, public comments, nobody from the public. No hearings, no conceptuals. Eric, select board report?
Very briefly, we had our water and sewer rates public hearing, and approved new rates that are up 7%. In prior years, and then I had a conflict and had to leave the meeting.
That was a sad meeting. I mean, obviously, there's nothing you can do about the rates, but it was a sad
It
meeting.
really is, but it's, we're funding, we're setting the rates where they need to be.
Right.
To fully pay for it. The good news is the debt that we had accumulated in the early 2010s should be paid off at the end of next year. So that's good news.
But
Okay.
we still have the remaining bad deal with the city of Lebanon.
Yes, there's,
It's,
yes.
they really
With
got
that
us.
For a long time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Levin. Legislative report, nothing really has happened other than about 900 bills that we'll be dealing with. The highlights, I'm sure you've read in the newspaper or heard on TV or radio or however you get your news. And, it's going to be interesting, to say the least.
A lot will not get done.
I'm sure. I think, we're almost evenly divided and the way policy is created this year is gonna depend on who's sick on any particular day and doesn't show up. So what can you say?
Looks like the second ADU is coming now.
Yeah, it might. I hope so. Well, Rob's away, talking to Steve,
Let's do the minutes.
so let's do the minutes. Anybody have any questions or comments on the minutes?
We were very late, sorry, guys.
I did not find anything.
I did not either.
I didn't either.
I make a motion, we accept the
meeting.
minutes.
I'll second it then.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions.
Abstain.
Bill abstains. Motion to accept the minutes as presented is passed. Let's see, we've done the new business, continuing business. I don't think there is any old business. Anybody have any old business they want to talk about?
Well, we did want to resolve that issue about the principal building for a lot.
I don't think we're gonna do it tonight,
No.
but you did raise the question, or at least point out the section to our professional planners.
Yeah, well, so my question is really, how do we present the issue to them I would suggest we take what Kirk and I wrote, send it to them. And let them, tell us whether you're right or wrong.
Comments?
Yes, and we only have to live with it for a year, hopefully, because it'll get rewritten.
Yeah.
The whole paragraph. But to your point, it could come
Right, right.
anytime.
Right, I mean, they could walk, we could be seeing them at the next meeting. Unless Rob already, anybody, anything on the agenda? Any projects on the
Any
agenda?
conceptuals? That's his question.
Well, it doesn't have to be conceptual, it could be anything.
Well, we're assuming.
Nothing in January so far.
Well, I'm just saying in general, is there
Okay.
anything,
That's
any
good.
projects that we're gonna be seeing in January?
I don't think for January, this winter, we may see something from, Laramie Farms. They've been in the state. We've talked to me.
Yeah.
They're working with DOT right now.
Mhm.
I showed you some updated,
Yeah,
but the ball is firmly in their court. We've had meetings with them here to facilitate, answers to questions. And
Yeah.
those kind of things, but, they have a couple of firms working for them. I think they're getting ready to start thinking about what they need on the zoning front. As we've said, the zoning stuff needs to be resolved if they're even gonna move forward.
Right, right.
So that they're definitely, they'd probably be in for some kind of zoning consideration in the next 2 or 3 months too.
Right, yeah, because, along with this, what we're just discussing, that question of what is allowed for how number of units per lot, and what type of unit per lot,
Buildings.
buildings, yeah, buildings.
Yeah, and they've been made aware of that they most likely need a variance, to clarify that, if that's
Mhm.
what they wanna do. I mean, they can go for a variance and make a pretty good argument
Yeah.
that it would be an unnecessary hardship to have to subdivide that all up there.
How could that possibly be an argument?
What's that
How could that possibly be an argument?
argument for what?
Subdividing.
Yeah, I
Or
mean,
not subdivided.
that it's a hardship that you can't do your development because of the way the zoning ordinance. is written. What's the hardship?
Having to subdivide?
Well, the original one had 64 lots.
Well, that's why it's gonna have to go to zoning.
Well, so Rob, you're saying then you've told them that a good portion of the planning board feels like
Yes.
that they cannot have more than one principal building on an individual lot.
Yep.
Okay,
And that if they wanted to proceed with it as currently envisioned, that they would need a variance on that language, the principal building.
okay, so you've come around to what we were thinking?
You forced my hand on that. Because if you're gonna make it a big issue at a planning board meeting,
Right, well,
it's gonna be an
right,
issue.
I mean, if I was sitting here voting and if someone came in with what you showed us on those plans, it doesn't matter who it was, with all these buildings on one lot in the R1, and I was voting to accept this application as complete, I'm saying it violates zoning. How can it be complete?
Yeah, so
Anything that violates zoning, how can you move forward with it? Unless there's a variance. So that waives it. That requirement that you're seeing as a
That's
violation.
why he's told them
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
because
yeah.
I don't know if, it depends who's sitting that night
right.
as to whether or not we decide it's complete.
Yeah.
Because if all 7 are sitting here that night, that means you're not voting.
Right, I know.
So,
I understand
We don't know
that.
what the number's gonna be. That's why,
Yeah.
and as the hardship piece is, that depends who's sitting at zoning that night.
Yeah,
well, let's not-
Because there's 5 people at zoning and you never know how they're gonna vote.
yeah. Yeah, I can't predict their votes.
Right.
I would suggest, Tim, that the hardship might be if they have to build 61 individual houses or duplexes or quadplexes or whatever to meet the zoning requirements, then the project just becomes uneconomical for them to do.
There's sure.
that would be a hardship.
We don't have to make the arguments for them.
No.
Rob has listened to the board and has instructed them to go to zoning for a variance on
Right.
this.
Yeah, they'll be,
Right.
both looking for height.
Right.
Yeah.
Wetlands crossing is a special exception.
Right.
And the subdivision.
But
Whether
the height's not too much, right? It's a couple
Not much at all.
Well, that changes everything. We don't need to really take the stop cut
No.
any further.
It's not ours. It's gonna have to go to
It
zone.
goes to zoning,
Right,
which is what I've always said, is that, you know, they can go and get a variance.
right.
So moving right along, Rob, can you give a 3-minute zoning report?
I got a report from the building inspector. We are at building permit number 161 for the year. That's a little bit lower than last year. I think we did 176 for the entire year. I said to you at some time recently that he thinks, well, there's less building permits this year. The permits that we do have are much larger. Jim Kelleher's building 6 units on Main Street. Dartmouth
Yacht club.
Dartmouth Yachting Club is building a
Mhm.
massive facility there. So 16 is the net. I think I mentioned it when they were here. That's the net new housing units coming in town. That's 23 new units,
Right.
minus 7 that have come out. So it's a net for 16. It certainly, the holidays quieted things substantially, which doesn't bother us because we're working on year-end stuff for town report and obviously still settling into the new facility at La Salette. Public Works had a hell of a week last week, as you guys are probably well aware, so that has affected a lot of things, but yeah, no, I'm happy to answer any questions specific if you have them, but that's about 3 minutes.
Is net 16 good, bad, or indifferent
About average. We did 16 last year.
compared to other towns?
Oh. I think Lebanon is probably gonna
Yeah.
net 700,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, because they've got 2 new large complexes. They put-
I was in Rochester, they built 1,500.
And Lindsay, wasn't it 200 housing units was suggested as our goal to meet the Upper Valley's housing?
yeah, it's something about,
I
you
think it
know,
was 3.
yeah, so.
So take 300, so divide that by 16 and that's how.
We'll get there in
Well,
about.
you gotta look at the raw data too from that too. You know, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
We had our employee holiday party on Friday. It was nice. It was right in this room. We had Santa here.
He's still there.
It wasn't David Frack dressed in a Santa suit. It was actually
It
our
was Phil.
highway. We could have had you too. Actually, Jeremy, I don't know if you guys ever met Jeremy, he's our new highway supervisor. He's got a nice beard and he has a Santa suit. And that was kind of fun to see him doing that, but I hope everybody had a great holiday.
Yeah, question since it's off the table now officially. The route for the LaCroix property, what was actually being proposed and what was the final straw with the developer? So we can sort of like working with the zonings, like this was a problem. Is it something we can fix or is it something that's out of our control?
A lot of it is in the hands of the owner of the property. Because not only does he have the land that's big chunk in the back, you can see it up there in the top, 43 acres.
Yeah.
It's kind of hemmed in by other properties.
Mhm.
You know, it's behind Shaker Valley Auto.
Right,
the
yeah,
Pellets Auto.
Right, so you at,
And so that's a big problem is that just to get to the land.
Yeah.
And of course, then you throw in the complexity of DOT saying, oh, you have how many trips per day? You know, you have to do traffic study.
right, yeah,
And they're like, oh, sight lines, you talked
Yeah,
about that.
yeah.
What drives us crazy is the sight lines for these developments gotta be real big and specific.
yeah.
Every day I go over LaPlante Road down onto 120,
Yeah.
and the sight line's about 50 feet right there to go onto.
Yeah.
And I mean, how many thousand cars go that way every day?
Yeah.
And so, but that was one of the big ones. It's interesting. I talked to the realtor. He and I talked on Friday last week. He does have a few others that are interested in that site. We actually have refreshed, Eric's on the committee. We have a new TIF committee that is certainly interested in doing what we can through TIF to facilitate something there, maybe some infrastructure.
Mhm.
And that's something that I've been communicating with the broker on that site. You know, that was the one that at some point along the way that they actually tried to get Market Basket or Hannaford's interested in it. And supposedly they were this close, but
They didn't.
No, they,
Hannaford never, I don't think.
No, we don't have the
enough.
population
Yeah.
for it.
So did that ever, did that get to the point where there are actually some sketches of what they
Yes.
proposed?
Yeah. So the buyer, or they had a buyer, so there was a purchase and sale with a due diligence clause. It's almost a $2 million parcel right now. It's on the market if you want to buy it. And so they had like a 90-day due diligence where they could go and do their work. They were doing pro forma, you know, looking at the costs and how much this was gonna impact this and it was a real serious developer, somebody that's worked in the state of New Hampshire extensively, that I was very excited to
What were they
work with.
proposing?
200 houses. Wow. It would be about 3/4 single family homes on individual lots. But they wanted to also do something similar to, you know, multifamily.
Townhouses.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, big apartment buildings, couple of those.
They had a sewer issue too, didn't
That,
they?
you're
They were
talking
gonna
about
have to
area
pump
in
sewer.
Henderson Hill, that whole,
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of Lovejoy Brook and Route
Yeah.
4,
Yeah.
right behind what was Shaker Valley Auto.
yeah,
Right.
so all the,
it's this.
the woods that are behind the
Yeah.
Anderson Hill properties.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that abuts it, yeah.
Yep, that's it.
And he's got 200 acres that extends into Canaan.
Yeah,
too.
and there was a purchase and sale option with the same developer on that land.
And he sent me a letter too, because I got a piece of property in Canaan that
Yeah,
abuts
that's
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
They were asking if they could add
The
that.
Canaan land's wet and steep. And of
Yeah.
course,
Can't hook up to
they
us.
were asking about whether the sewer could go over the line and I think town manager and the public works director are like, unless they wanna ante up. 'cause
Yes.
Right.
We own that, that's our,
That's
Yeah,
what it
we're
means
not
right
gonna
there at
give
the
that
line.
away.
We could,
Yeah.
there's no municipal agreement with Canaan, so Lebanon would have to buy into it too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but that was also the one that, we had researched, the idea of taking Route 4 as, urban compact.
Yeah, well, you heard their comments on that suggestion.
Yeah. Very expensive, I mean,
Yes, yeah.
but I mean, the town manager had done math, I mean, 200 units up there, mixture of, that's a lot of grand list value, it would certainly buy a lot of service, for sure. In terms of tax money coming in,
Well, it would have to be after they did the 10-year plan piece, obviously.
Mhm.
yeah, but, yeah, I mean, I've been to meetings where, I mean, Lebanon has tons of urban compact.
Right.
And they're always begging the state for help with, I mean, you've tried,
Yeah.
Route 12A is the classic, that's Lebanon Road.
Yeah.
Right through all those plazas, and
Yeah.
it's been terrible for years.
Mhm.
They haven't paved it, it's all fallen apart. And then Route 120 from about Keene Medical into the Lebanon Green
Right.
is urban compact.
Mhm.
So. I don't know, I mean, the Realtor, he's encouraged by our TIF, at least willingness to try to partner up. I mean, I've said to him, TIF is gonna do nothing until there's developers there and there's a meeting of the minds, and it has to really be, you know, you do this, we'll do that, that kind of thing, and we're still a long ways away from
Yeah,
that.
it's not gonna help you with DOT,
No,
and it's not gonna help you with Fish and Game,
yeah, fishing game was
When
the
did
big,
fishing game kick in?
because it's down,
Lovejoy Brook,
down on Lovejoy Brook.
Oh, okay.
it's all wetland,
That's
That
where-
is the DOT?
But that's,
they're worse.
So it's,
but fishing game is involved with wetlands. That's a whole different board.
Oh, the fishing game was definitely involved with this
Right.
Lovejoy.
cause,
There's wild salamanders and
Wild
frogs
salmon.
and there and stuff.
Okay, there's non-native,
no,
non-game,
it extinct,
non-game kicks in.
right,
Yes,
Okay.
they have a
Full of
very
turtles,
large role.
Probably habitat down there,
right.
could be endangered species.
Right.
All through that whole wetland complex, yeah.
Tim, you'll probably like this. We do have 2 new wells under testing right now. The one we drilled last fall and the one we drilled this spring. The one in the fall was rated at 40 gallons a minute, and the one that we drilled, this spring is, 80 gallons a minute. And, they have been proven not to affect our existing wells. They're not in the same seams, which is a very big deal. And those 2 wells are in our Marsh Well field. And so, they're gonna continue they have to do a lot more proving of the water itself. They're testing the quality and the minerals and all that stuff. But if we can kind of keep our fingers crossed, those two will come on to become more water for us.
Yeah.
And actually, the thinking is if those wells prove to be as good as we think they are, they can most likely handle the development that we were looking at right now, the 300 units. Obviously, if we go further, 200 units possible on that other lot, we need more water for that one, but it's a game that we play. It's kind of whack-a-mole with
Right.
water.
And it's kind of a question, I guess, I've had is how do you quantify that? And I think it should be that the Public Works Department hires a civil engineer to evaluate the water system in terms of capacity. There's a formula they do use. And some indication given to the town that, that represents what you can add on to
X
the water
number,
system represents so many.
Yeah, so we do have there is an engineering firm doing all the testing and the analysis and all that stuff. I'm not sure what they do. I can ask Jim to find out what they do above and beyond just the sort of mechanics of the water.
Well, I think it's a fairly simple
Yeah.
calculation.
Yeah, because it's sort of like national standards, so each household uses X amount of gallons per day.
And interestingly, that's coming down.
Well, yeah, that
'Cause
standard
actually-
used to be 19,000 gallons of water, and I can tell you what, if you were paying that kind of water sewer bill here.
Well, you can just look at what the average user is using.
Yeah.
Because you have it all those.
That's how you do, and you know what the apartments are using and so forth.
Yeah,
Let's take the number of gallons, divide it into the bill.
yes.
It's 5 cents a gallon.
But we were talking earlier about the number of people per household.
Right.
That's consequently, we're not using as much water as we used to, that's for sure. Our biggest water user right now is the car wash. And of course, we got another car wash coming online. The new car wash they just put the meter in today and backflow and all that stuff. And he actually has a reclamation system for some of the water. So like the rinse water can get reused multiple times, which will save him a ton. And of course, that saves him on the sewer side too, because that's where the big bill is for the sewer. But it looks like he's gonna be online probably by January 1. I mean, he's literally in the testing phases, might even get a free car wash if you show up there at the right time in the next week or two.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor,
Hi.
opposed, abstentions? We are adjourned at 8:37, give or take.
Miss Lindsay, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay.
Tim,
I signed
Good
on
point.
the website and I missed it.
you shouldn't be telling